A few days ago, I found this slide deck on my Google Drive, and I remember that I gave this presentation at an event called DevRel Camp, I think. The event doesn't exist anymore, but then I thought, hey, this presentation, not many people have seen it. Maybe it could be interesting to people who maybe are trying to get into developer advocacy or developer relations, whatever you want to call it. So I decided to transform it into a recording. This presentation is a presentation about presentations, about presenting, presenting specifically tech concepts, so demoing a software or a certain engine, as I've used to do at Unity or I'm doing now at Coherence. It's a specific type of demo, and it's not just a talk, but it's more of a tech demo, which I maintain are pretty boring. So I titled this presentation, How to Make Feature Demos Actually Interesting. My name is Ciro Continisio, and I work at Coherence as a lead developer. You can also find me on Blue Sky or LinkedIn, but if you just search my name, you'll find me. I've been giving presentations like this for the past 9 years, basically. Before I was working at Unity, now I work at Coherence, and I've covered many different type of tech, of features, especially at Unity, and now I cover multiplayer. So again, my opinion is that technical presentations oftentimes are boring in the sense that presenters, sometimes they focus too much on the tech itself and they forget about the story behind the tech. And they do what one of my ex-boss used to call, they teach buttonology, in the sense that they just teach you how to press buttons on an interface. And I think this is the worst kind of presentations. In my work at Unity and at Coherence, I always tried to transform my job into a teaching experience. And when you go on stage, or especially when you're online, you want to transform this experience also in a pleasant one, because you need to engage the audience, but not engage in the TED talk kind of sense. I don't want to make a show. I don't want to go on a stage and just capture the audience for 5 minutes on a serious but very engaging topic, that really speaks to their heart. I don't have that topic. I'm presenting about tech. So how do I do that? And for me, the formula that I found in time is that first thing, you want to build a narrative on top of the tech that you're presenting. So you're basically crafting a story, if you want. Oftentimes I would put myself at the center of that story, like I'm the developer, I'm trying to do this thing, and this tech helps me do that. So I guide the audience by hand through that story, right? So I present the problem, I show how I solved it, I show alternate solutions, I show pitfalls, anything that can really speak to that story, and not just showing the feature for the sake of showing the feature. First thing, I say start, but you can also actually end with a title, you can choose the title at the end. But the point is the title is the first thing that people will see about your presentations, especially if it's a presentation in person at a conference. They have to decide to bring their body to it, to the presentation. So a title can really make it or break it. And it's very easy when you're thinking of tech, of using a title that just talks about the tech. So you just say how does Coherence multiplayer for Unity work? And sure, that tells the audience clearly what this presentation is about, but it might be a bit boring. And sometimes, for example, coherence is not a word that in itself is very well known, and it might be confused with the actual word coherence also because we spell it with a lowercase c. So, if the tech is new, then your audience doesn't get much from that title. Even at Unity, when I was working at Unity, sometimes there was a new feature and then people didn't know the name of the feature. So they were at Unite, and giving the title of a presentation just with the name of the feature would not necessarily tell them what the presentation was about. So I think it's better to choose a title that has something more descriptive, even if you sacrifice the Googleability or marketability of your title. Like marketing people usually want to put all the buzzwords in the title, but you need to really think of your audience first as a presenter. So yeah, unraveling basic multiplayer concepts could be nicer. You're telling the audience what that is about, and then they also find out that it's about coherence. So I added it in parentheses. I don't know. That's up to you, really. I also think it's really important to always have practical use cases in your presentations. So not just I gave a presentation once that I really hated, which was called What's New in Shader Graph. And what's new in Shader Graph is just what's new in a certain feature, but there's no practical use case. I mean, I could have created use cases, but I didn't have the time, number one. And I didn't have the time to show them because I had so many features that I wanted to talk about that I couldn't talk about a use case. So I think it's much nicer if you structure your presentations around use cases, and many times it's just going to be one of them because you want to really dive deep into it. So yeah, don't give examples in a vacuum, but always like contextualize them with like a practical mini game or graphical exercise or a shader that you're creating. This depends on the tech that you're really demonstrating. And you don't need to make a big example, but you can make a small example, but then you contextualize that example in a bigger scenario so that you make the audience in a way dream about something that they might be wanting to make, but it would be too complicated to explain as part of this presentation. So you just narrow it on a small part of that scenario, and then you talk about the bigger picture. The other thing is, and this is really something that you need to train on, is that for me, the story that you present has several steps, and sometimes a step can be better explained with slides. Sometimes it can be better explained with a demo. It's not all about like making a demo, and it's some people will say like when you show tech stuff, always show it through a demo. Sometimes a slide is actually better because it's more digestible. Then you take the users away, the viewers away from the complexity of the UI, and you bring them back into the simplicity of a slide. Like, I mean, look at this slide, how simple it can be. And you explain a concept, a complex concept, and then you go back into the engine. And now that they have the concept in their head, they can now look at the engine and understand what's going on. So for me, the story always has several steps, and I like to jump in and out of demo slides. And the continuity that you can try to build between these stages, especially the slides, you have to really curate them. And then in the demo, you need to curate the steps that you take. That continuity needs training, and you just need to practice, basically. So always run a test of the presentation beforehand and see how it flows, because sometimes you will find out that as you guide the audience through these steps, actually one of the steps might be too complicated or too long, and you can only find out by trying. The other thing that I like to talk about is, I call them access points. So the point, my point with access points, what I mean by that is that your presentation might have several levels of difficulty, of complexity, and not everybody might be at that level of understanding. So you might have an expert in the room, and you might have an intermediate user that used the product for a while, and then you might have a beginner. So if possible, it would be really nice to create what I call access points. So points where basically you take every user on every part of their journey and you onboard them onto your story. So first, you obviously want to start with the less experienced ones. So the ones that have never heard of the technology you're presenting about. So you want to make a small intro. Again, all of this is depends on the time you have at hand. Sometimes it's not possible, but this is ideal for me. You want to make a small intro. So you take the new users and the ones that might have just happened to step into the room by mistake at the conference, or not by mistake, but by out of curiosity, but they don't know what this thing is about. So now you get them on board, and then you move progressively towards more and more complex parts of your demo. So this makes it accessible to several levels of skill. And as I said, you don't lose anyone rather than, having a presentation that starts from 100, and sure, you make the experienced one happy, but you lose all the others. Because you're not going to know who's in the room unless you're at a university and you know that everybody's at the same level. If you're at a conference, you never know. At a meetup, you never know if some users are more or less experienced. So you hooked everyone. So again, this stuff, I think access points need to be placed towards the beginning of the presentation so that then you have everyone on board and then you move them forward together. And you can tell the story. Once you have everyone on board, you need to keep them hooked. And keeping them hooked is an act of balance. the first thing you need to do is you control the pace of your presentation. So, of course, you've seen presentations where people go too fast or too slow. And obviously the virtue is in the middle, like the Romans used to say, in media stat virtus. But also you can sometimes go faster and sometimes you have to slow down. I think that's actually more realistic. It's not just you go at a mid speed all the time. You go fast when you think that the audience got it and when you're explaining something simple, and then you slow down on the hard parts, and then you repeat yourself if necessary. So yeah, first point is to re-explain. This actually is a very undervalued thing to do. Like, I think many presenters forget about this and they think that they're wasting people's time. But the reality is, like, for many people, that concept might be the first time that they hear it. So why would you lose them along the way for the sake of thinking, oh, I can squeeze one more point in? No. Stop, re-explain what you said, and really cement their understanding on that concept if it's important. It's much more worth than just like squeezing one more part of the tech. So what I'm saying by this is, like, as you explain something, it's fair later on in the presentation to re-explain it, to go back and to reference what you talked about before, because that also creates a sense of connection, right? Like, you show something, you say it, they don't immediately get it, and then you show something else, and then like, now I get it, and then you explain it again, and they make the connection back to the beginning, and now they're, that concept is fully formed in their mind. So sometimes it makes sense also to backtrack through slides. Some people would say it's bad form. The more snappy presenters will never do that because they think it breaks the flow. But you have to do everything to make your audience understand. So I think it's fair. You go back to the previous slide. You show again what you talked about. The concept forms in their head. The connection, connects and seals. And then you can move forward again with more confidence. Yeah, so referencing previous concepts. Because, the other thing I wanted to mention is that, as I said, people have different levels of skill set and familiarity with the tech you're showing. So my point is, you will never have everyone at the level of your presentation, but your best bet is to have a little bit of the presentation which is too simple for some people, a little bit of the presentation which is too advanced for other people, and then manage to have half of it that is just right. So again, you cannot have everyone at the same level, and your presentation, if you aim for a certain level, then it will always be, right for a certain part of the audience and too much for another part, or too simple for another part. So in my experience, I prefer it to be different levels of complexity, so that when you average all of this, you capture most of your audience attention. Not all of it, but most of it. So if you offer something that is digestible for the beginners, you got them on board. And maybe you bore the advanced users a little bit. They're gonna get on their phone, right, for a second. But then when they see that there's something cool on screen, they're back with you. And the beginner users, when they see that there's something complex on screen, but because you explain the basics, they can now kind of understand it. And that's really what you can hope for in a presentation. You can't hope that people go home fully understanding what you presented, but if you made them understand at least the basics of it, then they can do the rest of the research. So the idea is to make them excited, make them understand the basics, make them understand why it's important. Then they can search for the rest when they're home. And that's what you can do for the users that are not super experienced with the concepts that are a little bit too advanced. So that's kind of like the red area. They are there. And the experienced users, at the beginning, they will be in the yellow area. And then you have to just find that balance to bring both kind of users, all kinds of users really, to the area that is just right. And that's your best bet, in my opinion. So how do you help people focus on what they're seeing on screen? If you're in person, if it's not a pre-recorded presentation, you should try to control the gaze of the audience. So the audience will obviously naturally look at you, look at the screen. And if there's something on screen that's very enthralling, is that a word? They might just look there and they might not look at you. So I like to, move a lot and make big gestures, because sometimes I just want them to look at me so that they focus on what I'm saying. For that reason, I don't like slides that move too much. I don't like GIFs, because you can never stop GIFs. Like with a video, you can play it, then it stops, and now you talk, and they look at you. But with GIFs, they never stop. So either, unless you move to a different slide, they will many times, and you will have seen this, people just like looking at the slide and be like completely hypnotized, because the GIF is just going on and on and on and on. So I don't like GIFs. If you're in the editor or in the tech, I would say remove the clutter. So remove all of the panels, all of the windows, all of the options that don't pertain to your presentation. So prepare some kind of layout or something that you use, and maybe switch between layouts as your presentation goes on. And use the zoom feature of your OS. So Mac has a very powerful zooming feature. Windows also. I think the Mac is just a little bit like more smooth. And use it. Learn to master it. Assign like a shortcut. I used to have like a keyboard shortcut, and I used to have I can zoom in with 3 fingers. And just master it. And just become an expert, so that when you're talking about that particular button, you can zoom into that button and leave it on screen, as you talk. So again, you help them focus. They see the button and they see you, and they don't see anything else. So they have to focus on the button. And yeah, that's last point was to capture people's attention from the screen to you. As I was saying, like, don't distract them with videos, with things on loop. Stop what's happening on the screen so that they can look at you now. And on slides, it can be useful to reveal items one by one. So the same way as you present in the tech, like doing steps one by one, it makes sense that on a slide you reveal items one by one, so that they don't start reading the rest of the text and they get distracted from what you're saying, which belongs to the first item, right? So their imagination navigates somewhere else, and you lost them. No GIFs, yeah. That's my strong point here. Tech presentations sometimes can break. That's normal, and I think you have to basically, you always want to show your tech in the best possible light, but you always have to admit to the audience that sometimes tech things can go wrong, especially if it's not the tech that broke, but it's you who made some kind of mistake. How do you recover? Well, just don't linger on the broken part for too long. Just, don't stutter, just move on. Admit the mistake. That's the main thing, right? Don't try to cover it. People go like, oh, what was that? Let's move on. Or like what they did this week with Meta. They were showing some AI stuff, and Mark Zuckerberg and his pal, they blamed the Wi-Fi. You blame the Wi-Fi. Well, how is the Wi-Fi responsible for that? So now you bullshit the audience. The audience knows, and you lost them, right? So admit the mistake. Say the thing broke, and move on. And if it's a very experimental tech and it has a tendency to break, then having multiple examples might save the day. So if one of them breaks, but you jump on another one and that one works and is convincing enough, you might have patched the first mistake. So now the audience is still convinced that the tech can work, because if you have no other example, then they are left with the idea that it doesn't work. So sometimes for a tech that breaks and you have no alternatives, you might compromise the rest of the presentation. People will just think like, yeah, this thing doesn't work anyways, so why is he talking about it? Otherwise, you can just go back to the slides and explain. You can leave the tech aside, and if you have a slide that supports that concept, then you can explain in words what you wanted to do. Yeah, that's pretty much about it for what concerns the presentation itself. But as I said before, after you present, the story can continue. And I think it's important to think a little bit of what happens next after your presentation. So I like to, as I said, I like to build a story, and at the end of my story, I like to leave the audience with something to think about. So I don't know, it can be a question, it can be a hint of something greater, right? Like, as I said, like you show something small and then you hint at something that could be gigantic, or like a big game, or like a super cool game that you don't have time to make, but you inspire them to think about it. So you pick their imagination, their creativity. You can give access to the demo, of course, if you can do that. Sometimes it's a matter of preparing another demo which doesn't have the graphics assets that you use to present, because sometimes you want the presentation to shine, but the graphics assets, you cannot share them, the models or the textures, whatever. So you have to prepare another demo that is kind of like gray boxed, which I actually just did for the last coherence demo. And you share that instead, so that the audience also has something to play hands-on with after the talk. I have a couple of examples of presentations I gave, because of course this presentation that I'm giving to you now is not an example of this. This is a different thing. So don't take it as like, this is the thing. I've done tech presentations and these are my examples. These are the examples that I like to show, because I've given many presentations, but not all of them are good for reasons that sometimes were beyond my control. Ironically, one of the ones that I like the most is one of my oldest ones, which is from 2017, and it's called Bridging Gameplay and Storytelling in an RTS Game. This presentation is about Unity's timeline, but as you can see, I didn't say timeline in the title, because I wanted to interest people that have this curiosity about fusing gameplay and storytelling. In another conference, I gave this presentation about machine learning, and this was called How to Give Your Game AI a Real Brain. Do you like the title? I don't know. I thought it was cool. You can decide, of course. I don't think any title I've given is a masterpiece. But in this one as well, me and I believe I was with Alessia, an ex-colleague. We presented about machine learning using a very small but realistic game example. And then I made one for coherence as well, which I like, which is called Online Multiplayer Doesn't Need to Be That Scary. And in this one, as you can see, I focused on the idea that many people are scared about online multiplayer. And because coherence has this characteristic of being very easy to use, then I focused on that. So I don't focus on how to use coherence, but I focus on how to break that barrier of fear when it comes to online multiplayer. And I also want to give you a bad example. I mentioned it before, and it's what's new in Shader Graph. In this presentation, I was asked by the marketing department to show new features in Shader Graph. It's ironic because the room was pretty full of people, I would say, at that conference, because the people love Shader Graph and they wanted to know what's new. It was a new feature at the time, so anything new was big. But I don't like the presentation because it's just a showcase of different features, one after the other. You can watch it and tell me what you think. And that's pretty much it. This is my contribution. I hope you found it useful. Actually, if you want, reach out to me on Blue Sky. That's my username. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. And if you give technical presentations, I would love to see them. And if you want feedback, I can give you feedback, but only if you want it. But I'm curious. I'm curious to see them because I might learn a trick or two from you. Thanks, and yeah, goodbye.